it is your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We're going to zoom in and dive in and really probably what is a very uncomfortable topic, and that is that of the experience of dependency and narcissistic, psychopathic relationship dynamics. And oftentimes people don't feel comfortable looking at this, discussing this within themselves because it makes them feel regretful, remorseful. The emotional pain can start to well up when we look at the topic of dependency. And dependency is when your happiness, your self-worth, your value is contingent or based on one other person or one other specific situation. In other words, it's not an internal locus of control, it's an external locus of control, that which is outside of you. And that is the whole dynamic oftentimes that is set up in the stages of gaslighting, brainwashing, the idealization, devalue, and discard stage, which gets that dependency rooted, the trauma bond. All that is concept at work when we talk about the topic of dependency. When you are in a relationship, oftentimes that is based on fear and specific conditions being met to keep this person in relationship with you at an arm's length, on equal terms, on equal footing, to make sure everything that is quote unquote okay, to make sure that you are then satisfying their narcissistic needs rather than really being in touch with your own life purpose, your own strength as an individual, your own free will, and really oftentimes even autonomous, independent decision making. You no longer begin to operate on that positive order direction of thinking like we discussed here. You become involved in NOD thinking, negative orderly direction thinking, where basically you begin to think on fear-based decision making, and you become then resultant trauma bonded to this person or dependent because you need to make decisions outside of your free will and that which is really in your own best interest, your own best self-esteem, self-worth, autonomy, industriousness, your integrity, that which you kind of experience and live and test and grow in the world, which is known as self-esteem or security. It becomes based on and dependent and contingent and intrinsically then involved with this other person. So again, it's like having a blueprint on top of your own blueprint for your own really true self-identity. So it becomes intermingled, it becomes commingled, it becomes confused. And so this oftentimes is what is then experienced as dependency, codependence, or projecting onto the needs of that narcissistic or psychopathic individual. Oftentimes this is then experienced as staying in an unhealthy relationship too long, participating in activities which are not self-fulfilling or building a sense of security and happiness or fundamental self-esteem within you. And then in turn, these experiences become foreign, uncomfortable, or furthermore, one feels guilty for living in that energetic zone. So happiness becomes tinged with guilt. Independence becomes tinged with guilt. Professional development becomes tinged with guilt or self-doubt. Becoming, all those, qualities that are interwoven. Being able to freely make decisions for yourself without based on someone else's voice or their feeling of being pressurized into becoming a certain way. The control comes up. Their power comes up. They become to jockey over you. So you're constantly in an underdog or underneath position. You might be underweight, underemployed, underhappy, undercommunicative, very shy, withdrawn, dismissive, or docile, or easy to control. Again, you can see where you're constantly, used to that negative, orderly direction thinking where you don't trust yourself, you don't believe in yourself, you don't have, connection with your higher order thinking. You feel like there's something always on the tip of your tongue where you're quite not being the best person that you are. You're not all that you could be. You feel like you're kind of separated from your potential or being happy, just being free. And oftentimes this is free of fear and free of guilt and free of dependency. And the dependency oftentimes is because one becomes negatively or traumatically attached or bonded to this person for their assessment of their self-worth, their finances. It's basically like they always have to check in with this person, either physically, emotionally, psychologically, or spiritually. They don't have a sense of their own inner guiding system, their own true north set up. And that has not been validated or acknowledged or supported or nurtured. And this can again occur at many stages of someone's life. So what we see is the development of codependent personalities. Codependent meaning that your happiness, your self-esteem, your decision-making is then dependent always on this other person. It's kind of like, a wedge in your sort of experience. A wrench is in the engine. There's a thorn in the side. You become, in the beginning, this is very painful when this, oftentimes this can be set up through judgment, harsh, critical people who give the narcissist or psychopathic stare, the looks that could kill, the scrunching down of the eyebrows, the angered tones, the hostile body language, which basically, makes you live in a fight or flight, oftentimes, do or die sort of situation or urgency. And, it's the looks that then, distort your reality. So they crush you emotionally, crush you physically, crush you spiritually, where you can no longer be that happy, buoyant self, where you're living on free will, being able to make choices that aren't intrinsic to you in your own best interest. In other words, I would pursue this job, I'd pursue this talent, I'd pursue this group of friends, I would pursue, these decisions. Your life is made up of a whole conglomerate and a whole collaboration of all these different decisions. And if you had made decisions in this positive manner, in this positive route, it would take you to a whole different place in your life than as if you were then making decisions in this negative order or direction of thinkings to satisfy or to belay the fear that has been set up in your physical body, your emotional spirit, your psychology, just to get rid of that negative feeling. So people then begin to live reactionary lives that are dependent on this person in very many levels. They abandon their sense of self-direction, self-governing, autonomy, independence, integrity, meeting all those life stages, which are about becoming an independent, self-trusting, self-believing, connected to all their higher aspects of their self and allowing all the emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence that they have, emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence, all those sort of in a recipe for a healthy individual. So then we see pain, dysfunction occur in their life. Anxieties, the depressions, the post-traumatic stress, the not being able to think clearly, the ADHD, all this, the physical maladies that we see, the back issues, the neck issues, the degenerative diseases, the digestive issues, the predominance of cancer, because the body is entering into a degenerative state, emotional, and then the emotions and cognitions are then reinforcing and keeping this disease in place. And oftentimes it is because of a dependency. The codependency, again, which is on another individual or then set of feelings or assessments or what we could basically call judgment or critical thinking, it becomes like a critical advisor in your life. So it is based on harsh judgments and criticisms versus based on the positive. So people then experience a negative validation of themselves. They feel like they then live a depersonalized life. feeling like they're not really, they can't really be where they want to be in life. They're not in the right profession. They're not in the right, degree. They're not in the right job. They're not living in the right part of the country. They're not living in the right, they're not living in the right community. They feel sort of separate from their authentic self. And oftentimes it is because it is based on a development of a dependency on a certain set of systems or assessments which are not intrinsic or right or genuine, really kind of congruent with that individual. It's kind of like the shoe does not fit. It is not a good fit, but you've had to live in a state of force versus internal empowerment in order to satisfy a person, place, or events to keep those going. And so codependency basically is the experience of living your life only as it relates to a one person, or living to prevent the outbursts of another person. Your role is then contingent on being the subservient and not recognized as the independent, autonomous individual, exercising free will and being happy and all the positive emotions that flow from that. Positive identity, self-esteem, love, which is oftentimes characterized by lack of fear and lack of attachment. In other words, you're free to be independent. You're free to make your own choices. You're supported in your decisions. You're trusted in your decisions. There is the experience of trust. So the whole experience of independence versus dependence becomes really the important bridge which you must really look at and then identify, and that is exactly what we address here in the Peace and Harmony channel. It is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.